Hey guys, on today's video, we're going to be talking about one of the most important but often overlooked elements of embroidery digitizing, underlay stitches. Now think of underlay stitches as the foundation of your design. They're the stitches that go down first before any of the visible embroidery happens. And just like you wouldn't build your house without a solid base, you wouldn't do any stitching without any underlay. It's going to keep everything stable, smooth, and professional looking.
Centerline underlay is the most basic kind of underlay. It's a single line of stitches that run straight through the center of your shape. Super simple. It's perfect for small text, thin satin stitches, or light fabrics like t-shirts. It helps anchor the fabric and prevents your design from shifting or warping, especially when you're working on stretchy or delicate materials. You'll usually find this as an option under underlay type. Just click center line and adjust the stitch length if needed. Next up is the edge run. This one traces the outside edge of your shape, almost like outlining a picture before you color it in. You'll want to use this for satin stitches when you need clean edges, like on logos, monograms, or anything that needs a crisp finish. It keeps your top stitches from falling off the edge and gives your embroidery a neat, tight look. You can usually combine this with the center line or use it by itself, depending on the fabric and design. Now we're getting a little fancier. The zigzag underlay, or the parallel underlay, goes under wide satin stitches and creates sort of a base cushion. You can use this on thicker fabrics like hoodies, caps, or towels, or when you want your satin stitches to really pop. Sometimes you can combine the parallel and the zigzag at the same time to beef up your satin stitches and add a little bit more puff to it, just in case you want to bulk it up. It adds height and gives your top stitches something solid to sit on, so they don't sink into fuzzy or textured materials. You can adjust the density of the zigzag to make it lighter or thicker depending on the fabric. If you really wanted to add some bulk to your stitches, you can combine all of them, the line, the contour, the zigzag, and the parallel. Finally, we have the complex fill underlay. This one's for big filled areas. It lays down a light fill before the main fill stitching starts. Use it when you're doing large logos, backgrounds, or anything with big blocks of color. On slippery or thick fabrics, the fill underlay helps flatten the area, keeping your stitches even and smooth. Without it, the top fill can look bumpy or uneven. Now we come to the complex fill underlay. I ran some examples on some microfiber cloths as well as 2 layers of cutaway stabilizer. So the first one is this one here. And if we go to the underlay, you'll notice that this is just a contour. And as I go along, I go to perpendicular. This one is just a lattice pattern. Here is a full lattice. Here we have the edge travel, followed by contour and perpendicular, then contour and lattice, contour full lattice, contour edge travel, perpendicular lattice, perpendicular full lattice, perpendicular edge travel, lattice and edge travel, full lattice and edge travel, contour, perpendicular, and lattice, and finally we hit all of them and we put contour, perpendicular, full lattice, and edge travel. So when you're looking at the sample on the 2 layers of cutaway stabilizer, they all look the same and it's very hard to discern one from the other. Now, if you feel it, the one that only has contour feels very soft and supple. However, the one that has all of them, the contour, perpendicular, full lattice, and edge travel, is more stitch intensive and therefore it's a little bit harder and tougher. So depending on the look that you want, you would pick the underlay for the complex fill and for the thickness that you want to adjust. So it's not only that you have to adjust the density of the complex fill on top, but you can also control the density of the underlay as well. So the more underlay you have, even though all of these files have been done with the same density, the characteristic changes to a little bit thicker the more underlay you have. We'll go through these so you can see the differences. So for the first one, we have contour, and then we have perpendicular, and the lines run perpendicular to your stitch direction. So if I click here and I click there, notice my stitch direction is this way, so it's going to stitch this way, so the perpendicular is going to change. If I change my stitch direction to horizontal, my underlay will reflect that, and now it should go vertically up and down. You see, now it's going up and down. So it's always perpendicular to the stitches that you're doing. So let's go back to normal. Now let's run it again so you can see the difference. We have our contour, then we have our perpendicular, and this is a lattice. The lattice is always, regardless of what the direction of your stitch is, it's always going to go vertical and horizontal. And then you have the full lattice. So notice how the colors are pretty small, but as they start getting more and more underlay, they get longer because that's just more stitches that we have to do. Then we have the edge travel. The edge travel, it just doesn't really do much. It just goes to the edges. Then we have the complex or the contour and perpendicular, followed by the contour and lattice. Then we have contour and full lattice. Then we have contour and edge travel. Then we have perpendicular and lattice, followed by perpendicular and full lattice. Notice it's really dense. And then we have perpendicular and edge travel. So it's going to go all the way to the edges. Then we have lattice and edge travel, full lattice and edge travel. We're almost done. This is contour, perpendicular, and lattice. And finally, we have contour, perpendicular, full lattice, and edge travel. Notice how dense it is even before the stitches go down. When you compare the complex fills, one made on the backing and the other on the microfiber cloth, you can clearly see the difference. When you do it on the backing, you really can't appreciate what the underlay does because the backing is smooth and there's nothing sticking out. So if I was doing a very smooth material or something that is not so nappy, I really don't need a lot of underlay, and it would keep the image nice and soft. And the one that was just done with contour is really soft and it's very pliable. It kind of flows very well. Whereas the one that was done with contour, perpendicular, full lattice, and edge travel, that one you can clearly feel that it's a lot thicker and more complex. So there's a lot more weight to it, whereas the other one is very light. And if you look at the examples that I made on the microfiber cloth, you'll notice that the one that only has the contour with hardly any underlay, you could see all the nap sticking through it. So that's why we use nap blockers to kind of get those down. So the one that has all of them, it created its own nap blocker and really took good care of it. So if you have a topper, you can always use a topper to mitigate this situation and not really make the image so thick. So if you wanted to do a complex fill that was very light, you could use a topper to compensate for the lack of underlay. If you don't have a topper or you want your image to be a little bit thicker or more sturdy, more robust, then you can add extra layers of underlay to it. Now remember, there is push-pull, so you have to compensate for that when you're doing your underlay. The more underlay you put, the more push-pull compensation you'll have to adjust for, because every time you add a layer, it's going to scrunch that material, in the direction of the stitches. So in this case, the perpendicular is going to scrunch it down like this. The lattice is going to scrunch it down this way. The full lattice is going to kind of scrunch it down on both. Depending on what underlay you pick, you're going to have to adjust your push-pull compensation. I also ran the satin stitches on 2 layers of cutaway stabilizer, as well as on a sheet of twill. Now, when you're looking at the twill, the top layer is 50 density, 0.50 density, then we go 40, and the last one is 30. You can see that on a very sturdy material like twill, the underlay really doesn't make a difference as far as what you can see. It does make the stitches thicker though, so when you feel it, it's the same thing as the complex fill that we were talking about. The underlay on the satin stitch is a lot more smooth when it comes to having no underlay or just a centerline, and it's a little bit tougher and heavier duty when you do all the zigzag and the contour and the line. So it adds bulk to it, making it a little bit thicker. So depending on what you're trying to do, you can add extra layers of underlay to kind of thicken up your image or thin it down. All depends on what material you're going to run it on. So if you're making some onesies, you might not want to add too much underlay to keep it nice and soft. If you're doing a Carhartt jacket or you're making something that's really sturdy, that's going to be a showpiece, then you can add underlay to make it bulk up a little bit. Finally, we look at the satin stitches that I did on the microfiber cloth, and you can definitely see the difference when it comes to the underlay and also the density. So on the first one, we have the 50, which is the top layer, 50 density with no underlay whatsoever. And you can see all the nap coming through. And as you add more underlay to it, the nap starts to disappear. On the last one, or the before last, that was 30 density. And you can see a little bit of nap showing through, not so much. So the density does help a little bit. But on the very last one, you'll notice that I used a nap blocker. So that nap blocker almost took care of all the nap. Had I made it a density of 20, I would probably gotten rid of all the nap showing through. But definitely the underlay did help. If you look at the very top layer where I did 50 density, you can see that just with the underlay, it really helped cover up the nap. So a little bit more density would have taken care of it, just as you can see on the bottom layer. I hope you enjoyed this video when we're talking about underlay. Make sure you like, share, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you know when we're coming up with the next great content. And if you have any comments, make sure you leave them in the comments below so we know what you're thinking about. If you have anything you want to say about this episode or any tips or tricks you want to share with us, let us know. Leave them in the comments below.